Here.
Chris? I believe he's out. Brad?
Present.
Andy?
Yes.
Joe?
Here.
Scott?
Here.
And David is not here. Okay, the first item is to consider a request for transfer from the Finance Committee's FY 2024 Reserve Fund to the Town Manager Search Firm, Community Paradigm Associates LLC. Is Lou here? No? Susan, do you want to speak to this, or can you? Or is Lou here?
I can,
I think
guess.
it's
Okay.
only best
Oh,
for
okay.
Ryan, doesn't it?
All right, sorry.
They've been telling me to stay out of that, so.
I apologize.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Brian.
Good evening. How's everyone?
Good.
So we got a few different transfer requests that we're doing a little bit earlier this year instead of waiting until the end of the year. A couple things have popped up. The first one, as you're aware, is the search committee for the next town manager had basically presented, and then the board had agreed upon working with Community Paradigm as the search firm for this. They had a request for a proposal, and I believe the figure is $14,000 even, that they ended up coming to as far as the quote for the services.
Yep.
So the request would be to transfer it from the Finance Committee's reserve into the professional and technical to expend for that contract.
Okay, the only question I have is that, don't we have another account under general government that would cover this normally?
I don't believe, I think this is probably the best suited one for it. There's miscellaneous contractual, but I think it's a
Right.
little bit above and beyond with, it's under the town manager office purview to use it on a professional and technical. I could create a separate account strictly for this if we needed to be honest. But I just thought the professional and technical was the best suited account for it as it currently exists.
Okay. Okay, so does anybody have any questions regarding this transfer? Is everybody up on the process for the search for a new town manager? Okay. So if somebody would like to make a motion then?
I'll make a motion to transfer $14,000 from our reserve account to
Professional and technical?
professional and technical.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Terrific.
Thank you.
The next item is discussion related to taking steps to plan the future of the Boutwell School, the Shawshene School, and the West Intermediate School. We're going to pass over on this discussion tonight. It was basically, and I believe you all have a copy of the memo that came from Dr. Brand's office. It was an invitation. It didn't require any type of vote. If the chair of the Finance Committee determines that he wants to carry forward with this, then we can talk about it then. So we'll just pass over on that. The next item,
Could you clarify that for me?
Did I clarify it?
That this is the three-board meeting,
Yes.
and it's gonna be up to the chair as to whether or not we participate?
The invitation is to the chair of the Select Board, and to the chair of the school committee, as well as the chair of the Finance Committee. So our chair is out tonight, he will be back. If he decides to participate, then we will all hear about it, and we'll be invited to join in.
Isn't the invitation being sent to the chair as the liaison to the board, not as the decision-maker of the board as to whether or not we would be
Well, I think
attending this meeting?
I think if he wanted to attend it, he is the leader of the Finance Committee. So if you had a problem with him doing it, you could communicate with him. But he has the authority as the chair to determine whether or not to enter into those conversations. So, and at what time to do them, so. But for tonight, we're just gonna pass it over. I'm sure it will be showing up again.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding that? All right, so the next item is the discussion of the Siegel Group report on the Middlesex Retirement System pension liability. And I start by saying thank you, Brian, for that information. I thought it was very helpful in the age-old question of, are we really accomplishing a lot by making these payments? And apparently, by your memo, it's a significant advantage for us to do that.
Yeah, and just to, I guess, summarize for those who hadn't had a chance to read it in full, it was I pretty much wanted just to summarize or pass along what Siegel, who is the actuarial firm for Middlesex Community Retirement, they had provided an analysis of the prepayments that we make on top of our existing annual assessment to them. And basically, in their estimation, the prepayments we've made from FY17 through FY22, their valuation, that the actuarials have a different schedule, so they went back through January 1st of 2022, which encompassed our FY22 payment. So that was, we had made $7 million in prepayments over those 6 years. And their savings that they're noting that we're going to derive through 2037 is nearly $13 million. So we're seeing about a $6 million benefit by making those prepayments at this point. And that doesn't include the prepayments in FY23, which was $1.5 million, and the prepayment of $1 million in FY24.
Does anybody have any questions regarding this information? Seeing none? Okay, thank you. The next item is to consider a request for transfer from the Finance Committee's FY 2024 Reserve Fund to the third and fourth quarter real estate taxes on national development property at 175 Lowell Street. So Brian, if I understand, this is something that we don't really need to act on today. It was more of an informational.
We can do either. We don't have a firm figure yet. We still need the tax rate to be set. I
Okay.
did meet with the assessor who, based on last year's tax rate, put a rough figure of $10,000, which also encompasses a $100 one-time rental fee that we need to pay based on the contract as well, that we'd kind of included into this. So we just wanted to use a round number, at least for now, that should encompass the year end if you did wish to act.
So you think 10,000 per year or 10,000 for those 2 quarters?
I believe it's for the year.
For the year?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so since we don't have a firm number, I think we'll just pass
That's fine.
over on this. Does anybody have any questions regarding this? This is the field area that we're going to be leasing at the Textron location. Okay, the next item is an update regarding visioning and planning for the MSBA Wildwood School project. Mary Ann, did you want to?
Yeah, just briefly, you have it print out of our last meeting for the school, Wildwood School Building Committee. You just finished the visionary summary, and we're waiting for that to be kind of put into digestive information by Dawn Whittier. And that basically gives us a foundation on what we need for in the new school, you know, teaching areas and such. And if you go to the back, the scheduling update pretty much tells you every step of the process and the milestone dates that we need to meet. So you'll see that, you know, hopefully by 2025, we'll be able to come to the town with exactly what the Wildwood Committee thinks we should do as far as the structure of the school, a pre-K through 5 or a K through 3, you know, these are all the things that we need to study as we get toward that milestone. And we're just kind of getting into that first process.
So assuming that this is a good date, how long do they think construction would take, roughly?
Depends on the size of the school and exactly where it's going to be located. And so it's hard for them to tell at this point.
But a couple of years anyway, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Does anybody have any questions regarding this? Brad?
Thank you. So So rather than get my information from the press, I figured, since you're our liaison, I'd confirm what I believe this is saying. So at this point in time, the committee on which you're serving is not only considering a one-to-one replacement of the Wildwood School, but is considering other options that may include other schools in the town, elementary.
Elementary schools, which is the North, the Woburn, and the Wildwood. Those are the three schools.
So that issue's still under consideration.
Right, and we just don't know at this point. Everything, according to the MSBA, we need to study everything. We need to study all the grade configurations. We need to study if we're gonna do renovations or additions to the existing schools, but that all needs to be studied.
I just want to make sure I understood what the scope, if the scope was still broad or if it had narrowed at all, but thank you, that's helpful.
Anybody else? Oh, Scott?
Just looking at the timeline here, and because I think I have a handle on it, but I see on March 27th of 2024, so next March, there's a community presentation with submit PDP to MSBA staff after. Does that reduce down our options that we're looking at when we get to that point? Because I thought that was originally what I had heard for the timeline there. There will still be options, but we bring it down a little bit at that point.
Which date are you referring to?
The community presentation on March 27th, 2024, and then submit PDP to MSBA staff on April 18th of that year.
Now, I believe we need to go, and I'll let Vivian here, she's the vice chair on the Wildwood. She's actually an OPM that works with MSBA. She could probably answer that a little bit more in detail. Don't mind.
No,
Through you.
no.
I'm in the hot seat now.
Welcome, Vivian.
Welcome. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak and joining this meeting. Dr. Brown wished he could attend in person. Unfortunately, he got notification late and asked if I could attend in his absence. So thank you for that question. And as part of the MSBA process, you have to study a variety of different options. And as part of the submission, the statement of interest that was put in by the town of Wilmington to the MSBA, they did look to study a few other options than just replacement in kind for the Wildwood. They also looked to see if there was a grade reconfiguration that can transpire and allowing more funds to be made available to the town of Wilmington and to the school department as part of this project. So under that guidance, the Wildwood will be reviewed as a either renovation, replacement, addition in kind. And in addition to that, you are allowed to study a variety. So the options, I believe, are either keeping Wildwood as is and addressing the issues there, or going to a K through 3 option, and as well as looking at a K through 5 option. So as part of the process, as Marianne alluded to, we will be looking at all of them as a renovation, addition, as well as a replacement. And with it, we will not only look at the various sites that are available for this school configuration to be placed, as well as which one of the options would best suit the needs of the community. We will also be reviewing the costing that is affiliated with it, because it's not just about where will it fit, what configuration, but what is ultimately a high-level cost for it on a square footage basis will be the initial cost estimate that will be performed. And as we move forward in the process and select the option as well as the location and the plans get further developed, more details will be incorporated into the cost estimate as well. So the PDP is the preferred option, that it isn't the very final option, it is narrowing it down. So each submission will have a slightly little bit more detail and inclusion of information for the MSBA to review and consider, in hopes that by the end of, I believe it's 2025, right before town meeting, you will make, or the school building committee, along with the, select board and school committee and the finance, will all come to an agreement for a singular decision, and we'll know at that point what the cost structure is, as well as what the burden is on the town with the MSBA's contribution. That by the time we go to town vote, date is still to be determined, we'll already have a clear understanding of the site, the configuration, and the burden on the town. Happy to answer any other questions.
Susan?
I just want to add one thing, just for people who are listening. PDP is preliminary design program.
Yes.
It's not preferred design program.
No,
right?
sorry, it's the
Is it
PSR is the preferred schematic.
PSR is the preferred schematic,
Yes.
and the PDP is just a preliminary design
Yes.
program.
Correct, thank you for
Okay.
that.
Yeah, I just want people to know.
Thank you.
Too many acronyms.
Yeah.
She must have read the glossary that was sent out.
Yeah, no, it is, yeah, I apologize, I mixed the two up.
That's,
So just to kind of follow up on that, so the submit to PDP, that'll be voted on by the Wildwood School Building Committee to reduce down the options there?
We will be going through a series of meetings in order to start eliminating the options that do not work for the site and the configuration. And it's more of a decision at the PDP stage. The vote is for allowing the architectural team of Doran Whittier as well as SMMA to submit on behalf of Wilmington and the school building committee. There is, yes, we're narrowing it down. There is a kind of a discussion and a vote, but the vote is really to allow them to submit to the MSBA. It's not making a final, garnering a final decision yet.
Okay, thank you.
any other questions?
I just want to say one more thing about the visioning itself. I was able to attend it, and it was very interesting. I think in total it was over 4 sessions that we did, and I think it was over 13 hours that we spent.
Wow.
And it, started very high level. I'm trying to see if there was a breakout in here somewhere of exactly what we did here. Yeah, so it was, district-wide topics in the first session, which was very high level of kind of what the town is looking at. Session 2, learning and teaching. I'm trying to remember what that was exactly. Blanking on it now, but I did spend a lot of time at that meeting. Overall building planning, which was the way the building would be laid out, and we were looking at pre-KK, pre-K to 3, pre-K to 5, so a lot of work going through those. And then individual space planning, which came down to everything from how classrooms would be laid out, to how blocks of classrooms would be laid out, to how the art room would be there, the gym, where everything would fall in the school. So it was a lot of work that went into it. It was a really rewarding experience. So I would highly recommend kind of going through this and then looking at watching the Wildwood School Building Committee meeting from last week where they talked about it, because they kind of gave a good overview of what we did there.
That also, the visioning is for the public, for the attendance, and it's not just for administrators. It was also for student participation, high school students, middle school students, and for administration as well. And in hopes that by going through those 4 sessions, the architectural team as well as the OPM team can gather a lot of information and be able to understand how the school wants to function and what it wants to be when it kind of grows up, and where the proximity of the rooms and adjacencies need to be as well to function properly. With that information, they do start preparing the space summary, which will clearly understand what is overall the size or the massing of the building, how many square feet we'll need if it is a pre-KK option, a K through 3, or a K through 5, and that will help define how much land will be needed and space availability in town for it. So I'm glad you were able to participate. It's an amazing opportunity to do that. So thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
No,
Glad you
thank
were
you.
here to help us.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
Okay, the next item is an update on the efforts to assess the condition of ball fields and tennis courts at 175 Lowell Street. And Jamie McGaldy is here to update us on that.
Evening, everybody. Excuse me. I go. Okay. Just have a quick memo that you can either follow along with or
Thank you.
look at your leisure time. That we put together late last week. Thank you. So good evening, Jamie McGaldy, Public Works Director. Thanks for having me in. I'm going to discuss a little bit of an update on the Textron Fields, also known as the Lowell Street Fields, also known as the Dan Sullivan Memorial Fields. So as you know, the town is entering into a 99-year lease starting in January of 2024 for public use of these fields. Wilmington was notified of its eligibility to receive a federal $75,000 earmark for athletic field improvements in August of this year, and that was issued through the Mass Department of Conservation and Recreation. At the beginning of September, DPW requested approval of the earmark to assist with improving the existing 5-acre parcel out there at the facilities at 175 Lowell Street. As you may know, there are an existing 3 softball fields out there and also a tennis court for a total of 5 acres, 4 acres of which are athletic fields. At the end of September, we received word that the request to use the earmark toward the leased property was approved by DCR. But given the existing condition of the property, the DPW recommended that a portion of the earmark be used to conduct a feasibility study out there. Essentially, we didn't want to start investing money on this property until we had a baseline assessment of what was actually out there. And so the feasibility study will be looking at soil biology, drainage, the needs of various stakeholders on the property, and other pertinent conditions to support long-term suitability of the site, including looking at our maintenance needs, labor needs, equipment, and site work. And leftover funding from the earmark for the feasibility study will actually be used towards design and potentially some construction. So what we did is we called in the experts. Tom Irwin Incorporated is our current turf management consultant that we use. We've been using them for the last 13 years on our fields. So we called them in. If you flip the page, you'll see a breakdown of our cost estimate for that earmark, $75,000, and about $30,000 of that would be going toward the feasibility study. Again, that's all a grant earmark. There's no taxpayer funds going into this. So that gives us about $43,000 left over for, to implement some of the recommendations of the actual feasibility study itself. So that's a good thing. So as that's cooking, and we just really got that started, our turf management consultant will be conducting some interviews with some of the stakeholders in the next couple weeks. The stakeholders being the youth groups in town, the folks that would be using those fields, so that we can kind of assess, what their needs are, whether we need to invest in additional soccer fields or softball fields, and so we're going to kind of gauge some public interest that way. Again, we really think it's important to do this because the last thing we would want to do is just tell the public that the fields are playable when really they're not. We pride ourselves in Wilmington's field system right now. We've spent a lot of time and funding in upgrading our existing turf around town. We maintain about 40 acres of athletic fields, and the public has learned to expect a certain standard of those fields, and so we really want this field to look nice. It's going to take some time. In my estimate, it's going to take several years to get the field looking like that. But before we just start blindly throwing nutrients at the field, we want to find out what the fields can be better suited for. So in other words, if they are going to stay softball fields, there's a different treatment regimen that we would put into as opposed to just using it as a multi-purpose soccer field, for instance. There's also different maintenance requirements. If they were to be softball or baseball fields, the clay and fields require a lot of dragging, a lot of maintenance, as opposed to just having green space that we would have to paint. So that brings me to the second part of the memo. While I'm here, I just want to be fully transparent. The earmark is a good first step in determining what the needs of what our needs are, but the short-term concern is that the fields will require baseline maintenance, especially this coming spring, which is technically still FY '24. So at the very least, the property will require regular mowing and trimming, just to kind of get a baseline. And so what that does is it forces us to kind of absorb that in our current FY '24 setup with our existing staff and our existing operation budget. So I am throwing out here a request for 3 items, and these don't need to be decided on tonight, but certainly would like you to consider them. The third item is probably the most important and the most pressing, but I'll go through them. So the first request would be to increase our contractual services budget for Parks and Grounds by about $2,400. And what that would do is it would allow for kind of a first cut in the spring of that field. If you've been driving down Lowell Street the last couple months, you've noticed that the grass was unusually high just because of lack of maintenance out there and some neglect. We did ask National Development to kind of do a rough cut. They did that for us free of charge because, of course, the fields are still under their ownership right now until the lease starts in January. So they did that. The field is still about 10 to 12 inches high. It's not quite short enough yet for us to cut it with our DPW equipment without ruining it. So I would ask for an increase of $2,400 in our current FY '24 contractual services account in order to take care of that in the spring under our current FY '24 budget. The second request, and I'm going to be fully transparent here, over the next couple of weeks, we'll be working on our FY '25 budget. I'll be working with the temporary town manager, Lou, to make some recommendations for additional staffing for Parks and Grounds. And as I said, we have currently 40 acres of athletic fields. We're increasing our responsibilities by essentially 4 acres out there with just the fields, not including the tennis court. So that is an increase of about 10% in what we need to maintain. The last time we expanded Parks and Grounds was in FY '19, and that was when Yentile Park was released. We had an additional 8 acres there. We were able to make the case through the Finance Committee budget request that we get an additional worker in Parks and Grounds, which we successfully did. So I will be looking to recommend an additional worker in Parks and Grounds to help absorb the maintenance that would be required of us for this property. I'm just putting it out there. But in the meantime, under our current FY '24 budget in the spring, we don't have that luxury yet. So what I would propose to do is increase our Parks and Grounds overtime for FY '24 by just under $3,700. And what that will do is it will allow us in the months of May and June of next spring to essentially cut and weed whack those fields essentially on overtime, whether it be a Saturday morning or if we have to stay late, during the week. Our Parks and Grounds team is straight out right now, so it's not that we can really absorb that duty in and of itself without some sort of extra accommodation. So that's what I'm looking for there. The third item is something that we have in our FY '25 capital plan, and that was submitted a few weeks ago for review. But that is a $50,000 expense to accommodate the purchase of a new 96-inch mini wing mower. So again, we would need extra equipment to maintain this additional 4 acres. The problem is if we wait till town meeting and the budget cycle to order this, these mowers are typically 4 to 5 months out at the very earliest, so we wouldn't really even have it until the end of next fall. So I know it's a tall ask here, but what I'd be asking for is an advance of those funds. If we were able to get that now, these items are in stock now because it's winter. We could purchase it essentially off the state bid list, and this mower would be available for us to use in the months of May and June. So essentially, we would just be asking for that money earlier than we would be going through the regular budget cycle. So those are the 3 items that we'll be looking for. Again, doesn't have to be decided on tonight, although I would say item number 3 is fairly pressing. Within the next couple of weeks would be nice if we had a decision on that. And again, I appreciate your time. Just wanted to be fully transparent. We're absorbing more space. You wouldn't expect to create a building without putting a custodian in it, and it's really the same thing with our facilities. We want the property to be successful, and I would be disingenuous if I were to sit here and say that we can absorb it with our current staff and equipment as is.
So I do have a couple questions on the mowing and trimming, am I reading this right, that that basically comes to 8 hours a week?
Well, so the way this is set up is for overtime. So our contract with our union is a 4-hour minimum for overtime. So if they were to come in on a Saturday, it would essentially be a 4-hour minimum cost for 2 guys, so 8 hours total. The actual labor that's involved in that would be less than 8 hours, but the payout would be about 8 hours per week.
So I'm trying to reconcile that with hiring a full-time person.
So the other thing I didn't mention was, well, there's a couple of things there. I don't think it's reasonable to assume that we could sustain an increase in overtime for an indefinite period of time. To expect people to work every Saturday morning indefinitely to make the property successful, I think is unrealistic. It might get us through a short term, but we'd be looking to bring someone on full-time. The benefit to that is we then have staff in the winter that would help accommodate extra plowing. But there are 2 properties here that we haven't discussed and we haven't asked for extra manpower on, and that would be the new town hall and the new senior center. Each of those buildings are additional. We're still, to my knowledge, need to maintain this property here and the former or the current town senior center as well. So it would not just be just for the absorption of this 5-acre parcel, but it would also be to accommodate the senior center maintenance,
And-
additional mulching, mowing, and trimming.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear, when did you say the last time we added?
That would be in the FY19 budget, and that was for the creation of Yentile Park.
Okay. And the other question I had for you is on the item number 3. Ideally, when would you order?
If we had an advance on the funding, I would just need to check with procurement. As long as that vendor is on the state bid list, they are in stock, and I could order it as soon as I had approval for funds.
And what would be the latest that you would be comfortable
Ordering it, in order to have it for the spring. Again, they are in stock. I don't see these items flying off the shelves in the next month. I would say by the end of this calendar year would be ideal. Otherwise, if we were to wait and pass over on this, it wouldn't be available likely until a year from now.
Hold on a second, Mr. McDonald. Does anybody have any questions regarding any of these items?
Yeah. So Jamie, when you hire the interns for the summer, how many are on your staff?
We generally have between 8 and 10.
So they couldn't absorb the workload?
It's a great question. The answer is no. The timing is such that we generally have the kids after school gets out, which and by the time they kind of, get their schedules together, we generally don't have them until mid to late June, sometimes even later. And, the summer help is great, but they're actually doing other things. We have them dedicated to our stormwater maintenance program and weed whacking and trimming other areas. If we were to relocate those to this parcel, we would then be lacking in other areas as well. And generally speaking, they only work through the beginning of August at the best, and that's if they're not taking a family vacation. So it only kind of buys us a little bit of less pressure for a month and a half.
Cemetery eats up a lot of their time, too.
Absolutely.
And we do have that additional space
Yeah,
in the cemetery.
right.
The other question is, so there was talk to connect the 2 parcels, Yentile and the old Textron property. Doing that, would that take up any of the ball fields? I mean, have you gotten to that point yet to kind
Yeah,
of
and
incorporate the 2 properties?
Another great question. We have not gotten to that point yet. The intention all along during the planning of Yentile Park, which I was on the committee for, was to eventually, connect this parcel once we obtained it. So I envision a simple walkway going to that parcel. I don't think it's going to take up too much of the space there, but one thing the feasibility study will do is kind of conceptualize that layout and see how that interacts with the existing fields, whether we're going to keep 3 softball fields or maybe go down to 2 or 1, or eliminate all of them and just put a green space in. That's what the study will do for us. But no matter what we do, the creation of a walkway there will likely trigger permitting because it's so close to Maple Meadowbrook. So there's a little bit of engineering and permitting that'll have to go into that before the cost is certainly determined or the actual layout. But right now it's set up and it was designed with the intent to expand it later. So we're in a good spot with that.
What about the tennis courts? Do you foresee taking those down, or?
Well,
Pickleball?
so we have had some interest in, changing that over to pickleball. So we have a representative from the pickleball group that will be interviewed as part of the stakeholder public interviews to see what their needs are. Of course, we just created some new tennis courts at the Shawshene. We just resurfaced the Boutwell. The high school courts are in great shape for tennis. But on the other hand, we have new pickleball courts coming at the senior center, and of course, we have them out here. So again, the study will look at that. My concern with the tennis courts is that there's excessive cracking in them now. And sometimes you can get away with just crack sealing and repainting a court. Generally speaking, it won't last any longer than a couple of years. So it's a matter of, do we invest money in crack sealing it for just a short-term relief? Or if we're going to keep them, do we want to reconstruct them altogether? I can tell you, when we did that to the Shawshene School, it was upwards of $300,000 to reconstruct that court. So it's an investment, but that's why we feel that investing in the feasibility study first is really the best way to go, to determine how far that dollar is going to go.
So the feasibility study will also focus on the existing and potential need for parking?
Yes, it's going to focus on the whole site. So we have 2 existing small parking lots there now. And they'll take a look at that. Again, this will really, the recommendations will be part of a larger plan, which may include expanding the walkway in the back, probably striping those parking lots to kind of give them a little bit of traffic flow. Maybe expanding the lots themselves, but of course, every time you expand pavement there, we're going to be losing some field space, and so that's the trade-off. I mean, the whole intent of absorbing the property was to increase field space. And again, whenever you increase impervious area in a parking lot, you then have to accommodate for stormwater storage and runoff, and of course, that gets more expensive.
Do we want to bring?
Go ahead.
Does that feasibility also look into whether we're gonna have lighting there or not?
Yes, it will look into that. It'll also, again, depending on what the use of the field is, may or may not require lighting. Once we talk to the stakeholders, if they have a need to have, night games there, it may or may not. But any recommendation that's made essentially could be phased over time. I don't think anything needs to be done immediately right away, other than really creating a safe, level spot for kids to play. There's a lot of ruts and undulations in that field now. Essentially, what I would see in the short term, and again, after the feasibility study's done, there's still about $44,000 left from the grant, the earmark, that we could use toward immediate improvements. What I would see that funding being used for is some essential reconstruction of maybe some of the softball infields if we decide to keep them. Certainly some investments in the soil profile, the biology out there, to kind of get the turf and the soil to a resilient state where we don't have to continuously feed it with nitrogen in order to get it green. And that's something that we pride ourselves with our existing turf fields and our existing turf management plan, because we've been focusing on best management practices, overseeding. We're not relying so much on the use of pesticides and herbicides to get our fields green. We're relying much more on overseeding and practices that are a lot less, detrimental to the field itself and to the play.
Can I just summarize that? So you're asking for this budget, our current budget, $2,400, right? I'm summarizing.
Correct.
3672, those are not repeating, potentially, because you're also indicating that you're gonna be asking for an additional resource.
Yes, and so depending on how that plays out, if we are successful in getting an additional man, I would not be having to increase the overtime budget out there.
And then the one-time $50,000 capital request.
That's correct. If it turns out that we are not successful with acquiring extra staff, then that overtime request for FY25 is going to go up to about $10,000. And again, I'm not super comfortable with that, because that assumes that we'll have staff always willing to work that in order to make it successful, and that's really not a good way to rely on a turf success plan.
Brad?
Excuse me, I just have a process question. We don't have the authority to amend budgets voted by town meeting, so are 1 and 2 in essence, a request for either a today or a future transfer from our,
Mhm.
the,
The finance
yeah,
committee's,
our
yeah,
reserve.
yes.
So, I guess my other question is, what would the process be? We also don't have the authority to appropriate money for a capital item. That authority goes with town meeting. So short of a special town meeting,
Hmm.
how can we, other than, I suppose we could take the 50,000 out of our,
Mhm.
out of our reserve,
Right.
Right.
but I wonder if that's really the purpose behind that,
Well, the purpose behind that
that
account
account.
is to be able to supply funds for items that were unforeseen. So it really kind of started a number of years ago when the elevator at the library didn't work. And it needed immediate repairs, and I think it was in like the $80,000 range. And we had a very small budget at the time for the finance committee, but we were able to accommodate that because it was an unforeseen event. This falls under that because it was just recently that the ink was drawn on the agreement. So I think that it would be fine to, to vote to fund the $50,000. I'm going back and forth, and the numbers are really small, so I don't even know if it's really even worth worrying about between the first items 1 and 2. I think I would just prefer to wait until we got a little bit closer. But my concern earlier, as far as the timeline for ordering the mower and the latest that you could order it, the finance committee most likely is not gonna meet again until the end of January.
Okay.
So I don't wanna create any undue hardship on your end if we're gonna end up at the same spot at our next meeting.
And I don't think we would. Certainly the sooner the better, but really in January is just a few months away. And I think, you know, crunch time for buying these mowers, according to the vendor, would be closer to March, April.
So you would be okay waiting until January?
Yes, if that's what, if it means getting the funding ahead of time, then absolutely.
Okay, well, that's good to know. All right, then.
And the only other thing I'd like to add is, you know, again, this is kind of a first flush at what we think we're going to need. In our 5-year capital plan, I did put some placeholders for funding in FY '26 and FY '27 after the full $75,000 grant is expended, because we know we're going to need to do something out there. So, you know, those figures are still being fine-tuned, and they'll be kind of fine-tuned along with Lou and Brian when we kind of go over the capital request, but there are some placeholders in there. So when you see the 5-year capital, you'll see those items.
Am I correct in assuming that you applied for the $75,000,
I'd like to take the credit for that,
or your department?
but, no, actually, it was not our department. Town Manager Hull sent me an email from the state in, the end of August, early September, that we were successful in getting the earmark. To be honest with you, I'm not quite sure where that came from. I believe it was one of the state reps that had requested it. We've received a lot of earmarks in the last 6 months or so,
Okay,
and there's just a lot of money out there right now for grants.
This is ARPA money.
oh, I understand, okay.
It's ARPA too.
That was, okay, I didn't see that in there.
I didn't know, I just noticed it here. It's
Yeah,
it's
on page
ARPA
2,
it's
yeah.
ARPA 2 money, so
Yeah,
that money just comes,
okay.
comes flowing.
All right, so then just, is there normally any funding or available for the type of things that you be working on? So we have some departments in town that
Right.
are very aggressive about going after grants.
Oh, sure.
and it makes a big difference, but I understand there's some work involved.
Yeah, there is a lot of work involved in administering them. This is not the only earmark or grant we've received in the last year, so there's quite a few dollars out there that we have been, you know, obtaining if we're eligible for. One
So
of them
when
was
you get-
actually, one of them was an earmark for, actually this time last year, we received another earmark for athletic field improvements, which we put toward the construction of the Frank Kelly track. to help supplement that. So this one was ARPA 2 money, but it was specifically earmarked for athletic field improvements when we got it. So the timing was kind of just great.
Okay, so when you come into your budget meeting, if you could just note in your records what grants you have brought in.
Sure.
We just want to be able to recognize that
Mhm.
and encourage it, because, like I said, the departments that do spend a lot of time on this end up bringing in a lot of money, and it's appreciated and it should be acknowledged.
Great.
All right, so if I'm understanding clearly, you're not expecting a vote tonight on either of these three items, and that you would notify us if something were to happen with the mower, that you needed to address it before January, February.
Yes, I mean, this is a piece of equipment we don't have, so, and again, we won't be needing it really until the spring, until early May. So if it means waiting until January to make that vote, then we'll take the vote. If it's vote in the affirmative, then we'll order it as soon as we can. And even if it's still back ordered at that point, it would be a lot better than waiting until
Right,
town
as
meeting
long as we're
approves
not
it.
putting you in a tough position. And do you have a place to store a piece of equipment that large?
Yeah, it's a 96-inch wide mower, but the wings fold up, so we'll definitely find some space in the garage for
Okay.
it.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Scott.
About the mower itself, last year, did we approve buying a new mower? A new wing mower?
Yes, great, so, great memory on that. But that is our flagship wing mower. That's the mower that cuts the field out here in the Shawshene School.
Okay.
That has been purchase ordered, and we're actually waiting delivery on that. That's going to replace our existing flagship wing mower, so that'll still be in use, cutting everything it cuts now. This is really, the purpose of this would be to absorb, an additional 4 acres, and then some, in other areas that we can use it for as well.
Okay, so it just kind of reduce wear and tear on the flagship one that we have, and this would be an addition?
It would, but the biggest thing it does is it allows us to operate both at the same time, with different men, so that we can attempt to try to absorb this during the day. But I would see that we are definitely going to have to go into overtime in order to absorb another 4 acres with only 7 guys in Parks and Grounds.
Okay. And just one final comment, I know you're very proud of the fields. I coach soccer and going to other towns, and flat out, we have the best ones.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate
and there are other coaches come up to me and talk about how great the fields are, and I've had other coaches say that they actually have to patch their own fields
Yeah.
because their DPW doesn't do it for them. So, thank you very much
thank you.
for all the work you do on those.
Appreciate that. Yeah, we did have an article in the APWA magazine, American Public Works Association, a couple of years ago that went national, and I'm still getting calls from public works directors from other cities and towns around the country about our turf management program, and really meant a lot to the guys to know that they've been showcased. So thank you for that.
All right, I think we're finished with our questions. All right, just want to thank you very much, Jamie, and we will certainly address this again once the Finance Committee goes into budget meetings.
Great, appreciate that very much.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a nice holiday.
I
Thanks
do
for
see you, Mr. McDonald, but if you could kindly wait until the end where it says public comments.
I'd be willing to do that. The only reason why I was raising my hand is because my comments were specifically pertaining to this discussion item. So
Okay.
if there's any possible way that I could offer a little input,
Well, I'm sure Mr. McGaldy wouldn't mind waiting for a few minutes until, we only have a couple more items, so he'll be here to answer your questions, but I want, if you don't mind, I'd like to stay in order. Thank you. Okay, so, moving along, Brian, I think you're up on this one. Discussion of permanent financing for the Nassau Avenue Water Storage Tank, the new senior center, the new town hall, school admin, I'm sorry?
There was an agenda item before that.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Shawshene Tech.
I had checked that off already. Okay, so the discussion of expectations for the submission of annual budgets from the Shawshene Tech High School and the Wilmington High School. This is just an update because, and it actually does not refer to the Wilmington High School at all. The Shawshene Tech, under their first year with their superintendent, was significantly late with their budget last year. It caused a great deal of disruption in the Finance Committee's meetings and schedule and calendar, almost to the point where it may not have been able to have been considered. So I have been told that it should be timely this year, and hopefully we won't experience that again. And that's all we have for that item.
Do we have a date we can, a target date we can send?
They
Shawshene
will.
back?
Yeah, John will be in touch with them. John spoke with him
Okay.
and
they have a
assured him,
Approximate date?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now, discussion of permanent financing, the Nassau Avenue Water Storage Tank, the new senior center, the new town hall/school administration building. Brian?
All right, and I believe this was just a quick general overview, was my understanding.
Yep.
The town, as you may know, works with Unibank on bonding issues such as these. The town works with them, has worked with them on an annual basis to roll and do the bond anticipation note on the Nassau tank that's been around for a few years now. So we're looking to roll that in with the permanent financing as voted with the senior center and the town hall school admin project. The expectation is that we would work with Unibank on, I guess the process goes is would draft what's called the preliminary official statement. And that's almost a booklet that they use as a prospectus in conjunction with S&P for any potential bidders in the process. That takes about a month sometimes. It pulls together a lot of information from different stakeholders within the town. While we're doing that, we'll also work to get on S&P's calendar for a ratings review call. That's typically about a month and a half out from the time you start to get the ball rolling with them and commit to do so. They may even, we'll work with basically historical questions that they've asked before and stuff that we know that they will assume they're asking as far as direction of the town, building projects, et cetera. Once we do that, then typically a week or two later, we'll get a rating from S&P. We've been at a AA+, we've been a notch below AAA for the last few bites at the apple we've had there, and hopefully we can break through. We've had issues before that we feel like the town's been held back outside of the town's control on some of the ratings issues. But obviously the hope is that we can eventually break through and get a AAA rating, which would provide a better potential rate on the bonding of these projects. We're looking at about 11 million for the senior center. We're looking at about 24 million for the town hall school admin and about 2.3 million on the water tank.
So about 37 million. So you don't think that that would have any impact on our bond rating that we'd be taking on?
On the fact that we're going, no.
Right.
No, that they wouldn't look as a detriment to that. I think part of it would be the fact that we're taking on projects now.
And that's a positive.
As well, it is a plus. They always look at, I'm sure you've heard Jeff mention it before too, as far as our debt to operating budget ratio is typically lower than most communities, and that's because we haven't had to go out to bid or to bond projects because we've been able to kind of keep the buildings as is for quite a while now. And we're finally getting to the point where we're starting to catch up on that.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions for Brian? Okay.
That's helpful, thank you.
Let's see. Okay, so the last item is to consider a request for transfer from the Finance Committee's FY 2024 Reserve Fund to the personnel changes for Veteran Services Department and Elderly Services.
I
I'll
was
say,
gonna
no, it's,
you know, you can choose your poison here. This kind of came out of Lou hopping into the seat for the town manager, stepping up to do that. And in that process, Lou had said I would need my person to be, which is a person that they share with the COA.
yeah, there's one half FTE for each
Half,
department shared for
Yep.
one individual, so.
Benefit eligible position shared in 2 places. So he had asked for that person to be moved into veterans for full-time, which the powers to be during negotiations said okay to that. And in the process of coming into our office, I did say to Lou, you know, I'm sure that he and Terry had talked and that person was gonna move over there, but she wasn't gonna give up her hours. So there was the need to come back to you and say, we still have these hours in COA that we have to refill with a person. And quite frankly, Lou and Terry had been talking to Jeff, I believe, for multiple years.
Couple of years at
About
least,
the
yeah.
needs for those departments to really have a person, not a half a person in those two. So this is kinda being pushed ahead by Lou joining us, and then, but having the opportunity to come before you, and I realize it's a little before when their normal budget meetings happen, but we do have an immediate need in the COA, and Terry can speak to this on our own, but what I see as a human resources person, we've been down a couple people there, just due to natural things that happen, you know, life events and illnesses and, you know, injuries and things like that, and it's been too lean to cover. Many of you have probably heard complaints about us not having a driver, for example. We haven't had a driver for a long time. Terry and Laura have been jumping in to fill in that spot. It's been very, very lean at the COA. Patty, Lou's assistant, is currently over at his veterans office now, and and Terry is further depleted right now in staff. So those reasons are the reasons we're bringing this to you a little earlier than we would normally say, bring that in your budget meeting. But, you know, unusual events happen to get us to this point, so maybe Terry wants to come up and say,
Well, if I could just interject there too, probably 7 or 8 years ago, Terry and I were talking to Jeff about, we both needed help, and we come up with this idea that we could do a half and half position, and it's worked out phenomenal. And that's been over 5 years now, right?
Yeah.
5 or 6 years, and it was a great fit. A lot of senior veterans and a lot of paperwork between the both of them, fuel assistance and all that good stuff. But we've kind of blown it up, and Patty could more than spend time in our office, and I know Terry's, well, she's been down too because of a couple surgeries too. But yeah, the position was wonderful how it worked out, and it kind of grew into this position where we both could use our own. And I don't know as far as the staffing goes, when they have a new building, obviously you're gonna have more programs and whatnot, but obviously you can speak on that, so.
I think Lou brought up a really good point. Lou and I worked very hard to making sure that we could get a full-time position for us to share. And as time has gone on, it's evolved into the point where it was a great position. It's been working out wonderful. But we also realized because of that, the need for a full-time for both departments was becoming evident. And we had spoken to Jeff Hull about this, three of us having
Like
these
2
discussions.
years ago started.
Yeah. And so we were actually planning on approaching you during the budget time, but due to unforeseen things happening and Lou stepping up here, it's really, this would be a perfect time for this to be a full-time benefit position. There's a lot of things happening in the department. And, at the opportunity, you were saying also about grants. I have a couple of grants that I'm hoping to hear to come back, and the manpower, I'm not planning on me being a transportation driver, or my case manager being a transportation driver on a daily basis, and never mind a few other things that I do not want us meaning the town, us meaning not completing unmet needs that are within the community and missing out on this grant, fulfilling it because of staff. So it would truly benefit. It's actually a food, it's to better fresh food, fruit and vegetables dispensed, a program that I had a couple of years ago with another grant, and I have opportunity to increase that. So, volunteers that we have are phenomenal, but volunteers can only do so much, and if you're doing this type of food insecurity, when you're talking to people, it usually leads to other things that people need. So in saying that, I don't want to further burn out my department.
Do you have a driver now?
Yes, I am.
No, do you have a driver?
No,
You
right
haven't
now
filled that
she's-
position?
We have that position, but right now, they're on medical leave.
And
They
that's
should be
been,
coming back soon. She left, July 18th. It was kinda, up in the air as to when that would be, she'd be able to start, but the surgery was a little more, intense than expected. So hopefully, things will be happening soon.
We couldn't hire a temporary driver during that time?
we tried, we went to the schools, we talked to the busing people, thinking maybe that some of the buses, people that weren't working in the summertime could do that. We tried, we advertised it, we didn't get any interest. And this is to the point that we're making too, is you might say, how can you do this a little lesser? We've thought about those things, and one of the key components here is this is a benefit eligible position, and you get a higher level of personnel when you're offering a benefit eligible position, and if we take that benefited person away and she goes to Lou's office, then, and we only have a part-time person, getting her a part-time person is not gonna replace what she had or fill the need that she has. And I can speak to this on another level too, because, we try to, with the unfunded liability of vacation, you have a lot of long-term employees, people have vacation. We really try in the Human Resources Department to make sure people are burning down vacation, not keeping it, not rolling it over to, greater amounts. And I've literally had people from Terry's department be like, I can't take it because there's just, someone's gonna call and it's gonna be a matter of, need of an elderly person and we're not gonna be here to answer that call and I can't take it. And that's, I think when your signals start to tell you you're lean, too lean.
So I hear what you're saying, Terry.
Mhm.
I think I'm looking more towards, you needing more help when the new senior center opens
Yep.
in December of 25. 25. Is there, I would prefer, honestly, since we're taking this from the FinCom's reserve account, and since we are asking all the department heads to not add people, to cut back on capital, so that we can get through this budget year with the minimal of issues, is there any way that you could find a part-time person that could eventually transfer into a full-time position when you are in the new senior center?
No. And I feel very strongly in saying that, because I need to make sure that I have, that the person that was shared was extremely qualified to be able to do casework and be able to assist when we were back up for transportation or home-delivered meals. I think and the fact that she was actually full-time. Our two departments kind of bounced that person back and forth. So sometimes she would be a little longer with me that week and vice versa with the veterans. I think waiting for that full-time position to really be able to start, if we're saying we're waiting for the next budget year, so that wouldn't really be till July, and then we would put it out. I really would honestly get someone to really work in the department until the end of August, beginning of September. And I can't, our department right now is completely strapped. We just didn't expect this to be happening. So, what's happening in their department is also having a true effect on our department. And this is the very first time that I have to say, usually I'm like, oh yeah, rose-colored glasses, I can do it.
Mhm.
My department can't do this.
No, I know that is, historically, you have been, you have had that approach to everything in your budget. There's no argument there.
So, I understand your request from now until July 1st. The Lou is moved over, up, down, whatever the direction you wanna call it. Temporarily. On July 1st, he'll, I assume, unless something happens permanently, that he'll return there, and you could perhaps return to
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
old situation until you open your new senior center, and we understand, like with, when we get new fields and we get bigger
Need.
buildings, we get more programs and you need more support. And but that's a decision that should be made in the context of the FY '25 or the FY '26 budget. I don't support adding personnel, permanent personnel with a reserve fund transfer. We're making a permanent commitment to using a temporary, we're basically committing FY '26 funds, FY '25 funds, because we've made a decision. We don't know what the whole picture of FY '25 are. So I would support adding a full-time person, a temporary person from now till June 30th, under the assumption that we would go back to the status quo on July 1st. And if that changes, then we can make that decision later or during the budget process, or town meeting can have a say in it, which is how budget should be decided by town meeting. So I think we're kind of mixing two things here. One is a temporary need, and one is a long-term need. I think we should fill the temporary need with a reserve fund transfer through June 30th, and then wait and see what happens with the Director of Veterans Services, because if that position, that
Goes
position
back to
may go back. And then we could go back to the 50-50 with your great person and until we get, until the senior center is built, and then we have a better idea what we need long-term.
I agree with
Can I
that.
just play devil's advocate just for 1 second here? As to, so, yes, that, the goal was, before all this occurred, is to us to come to your committee during budget time to have, Department of Veteran Services have a full-time person, correct, Lou?
Yeah.
And then, for us, as Department of Elderly Services, asking for a full-time person. So from what I'm hearing that you're saying, that full-time person would not occur until the new senior center, which would be, the following, actually, it would truly be the following year. I see that as a deficit to the Department of Elderly Services. And the reason for that is, in order to prepare for a new senior center and for the programming of that, programming has to be done in advance, not right when we move in. So that would be the approach as to why I'd be asking, hope at the time, was approaching your committee saying, we really need to get a full-time, because at this point, there are so many different programs that we would like to be, now that we have the space, because that means we can have several programs going on at the same time. That's the whole goal of the new senior center. So it's really getting super programming going in there. So that would be so we'd really only be asking for another, like a half-time position, which would cover the need of the programming and the outreach. So I would see it detrimental if we waited until after we get, the process of getting a new senior center, for that additional half piece, because we'd lose out on programming and also the grants that I could go for, showing that we have the staff to be able to provide this. So,
I respect, if I may,
Yes.
I do, I understand your position, and I just think that ultimately, we've had two department heads here tonight, both of whom are saying, I'm gonna need more staff in the FY '25 budget. And we haven't even seen the temporary town manager's recommended FY '25 budget, what the increase in health insurance is, what the available funds are. We have no context in which to make a decision about a permanent employee. I think it's very, ultimately, in my opinion, town meeting decides if we hire a new employee. If we add staff, that's a decision that's made through the budget process, that's made through town meeting. They're the ones who approve a budget. We recommend a budget. So I just think, I just caution, I just think it's above our pay grade, so to speak, to make a decision about a commitment to permanently hire someone out of the budget cycle, using reserve fund transfer to get that person started. Again, I understand the need. I've seen you privately, Terry, helping members of my family. I know you're out there driving. I don't want us to appear ungrateful, because I am not. I think we're in a tough spot here, and I just think we have to be careful not to overcommit too early.
Well, I think, go ahead, you wanna go ahead?
Well, to Brad's point, when FY, you're saying that you would want them before the new senior center opened, but that's not until 2025, correct?
Correct. Well, probably
So,
January of 2025.
To Brad's point, if you came during the regular budget season and asked for an additional employee,
Exactly.
then you wouldn't be behind the 8 ball, because that would be your FY '25 budget.
So basically, if you had an employee that left during the year, you have to replace them.
Mhm.
But the money's already been budgeted for that, so they just slide right into the position. What is being asked here is to take a part-time position and turn it into a full-time position. And what we're saying is that you could take a part-time position and replace it with another part-time position and consider it temporary, in which case we can accommodate that in the FinCom reserve. But in the next budget, come to us with your argument for a full-time person. If that person is working out for you, and you think they're gonna be a great full-time person, then I have no problem with doing it prior to the senior center opening, because I think you made a good argument about the need to lay all the groundwork. It's gonna be a considerable job organizing a brand-new building with a lot of new people coming in there to see it, asking for everything under the sun. It's gonna be a lot of work for you and your staff, so I have no problem with doing that before we open the building. The tickle is these few months here. You know, I think Brad made a good argument that we're trying to turn one thing into another, and it's kind of beyond our scope with this account.
May I ask just one question for clarity for both of us? Should Lou and Terry be making their case to have their person be a whole person in there?
Yeah.
Because forgive me, Lou, but I wasn't part of the discussion about how that position moved, so no one said to us, it's temporary, it's not temporary, they just said, she's going there, we're going there, and we're just kinda, Terry's here today just reacting to that, right? That we're just.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
All right, it was during negotiations, okay? I felt that there was a need for the town. For whatever reason, we were losing a town manager, and I felt that they sent the email out to department heads, does anybody want to help? That's what I did. I also, during negotiations, told them that, now you got a 2.5 person department going down to 1.5. And I also told Terry that this is not just the Veterans Office that's getting impacted, it's the senior office. But it wasn't just thrown out there where I'm saying Patty's gonna be there full-time. It was during the negotiations, that's what we came up with. I actually took a reduced pay than they offered, as you know. And that's how this all started. It wasn't, and I feel bad that it's come to this, but that's my reasoning why I did what I did.
Okay, so why don't we leave it at this? why don't we look into our restrictions on our account? And just so that you understand, probably the people that were in that room when that issue was brought up are not aware about this account, and they're not aware that there are restrictions on it. So,
Well, no, we weren't talking about hiring anybody or,
oh, I'm sorry, I thought you.
no, we didn't talk about hiring anybody or anything, you know. And I just recommend that Patty, when she comes back, which she has come back, go into the Veterans Office, because we're a 2.5 staff office, 1.5.
Right.
My point is I'm sorry all this is happening,
It's all
but
right.
that's the
We'll
reason
figure
why,
it out.
that's the reason
Yeah.
why I did it.
Yeah.
You know, and I called Terry and I said,
Yes, you did.
look,
You
this
did.
is not, this is a trickle-down effect.
Right.
You know, I didn't mean to offend anybody.
Yeah.
I didn't mean anything like that. This is just, I
Oh,
thought
you know, and speaking for our department, Lou and I have always worked very close, our departments.
Yeah.
That's why we did a shared employee.
Right.
which has worked out
So that has
phenomenal.
that has nothing to do with him stepping up to this position or anything like that. We're just, it is what it is. We're just in a
Right.
situation that now that part-time position has left the department, that was a case worker, we're in a need. We are in a need, and that's it.
And I mean to
So,
explain
I-
it, that's
I
why
think-
we're here.
I
That's
think at the present time, especially being down a driver, I think you need to really pound the pavement here and try to get some temporary help, especially to cover the driving situation.
We have been pounding
Yeah,
the
we
pavement
have.
on it.
I know, but
I'm
to
just
even,
saying to you.
maybe to combine the two positions and driver or caseworker and try to get a part-time person in. You know,
That aside,
to get you into the
But-
FY
But
twenty-five
were we
year.
just talking about potentially, cause she has, so she would have her regular funding that she has for her half a person.
Mm-hmm.
And so what she would be asking for is additional funding to make that a whole person. And was there consideration on this board to do that on a temporary basis so that she could hire a temporary full-time person? Was that, did I miss?
Right, so I'm not certain, with the restrictions on this account, how far we can go as to employment. And I would not want to make a decision tonight without full knowledge. This is a restricted account that is set up to be used at the discretion of the Finance Committee on things that were unforeseen, which obviously this is unforeseen. However, I think, you know, to Brad's point, he brought up a good point, that this is creating a budgetary item that is going to linger on into the future.
Absolutely, no, I understand.
And, you know, that's where it might get a little tricky. So what I'm asking, if you could search and start searching for a part-time person, and I will research this account. And hopefully, between everybody taking a look at it, we'll figure it out. Okay?
And are we?
And I would definitely put in for your full-time person in the next budget.
oh yeah.
So, I know there's still quite a few months between now and July 1st. I'm not discounting that. But we're not saying 2 years from now. We just want to work with you and we want to get this resolved, but we have to do it in the proper way on our end.
Okay, thank you
Okay.
for listening.
Okay.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that? So are we saying that we're looking for, cause I'm thinking of like an FTE, full-time equivalent.
Right.
So is it somebody that's 40 hours for 6 months, which is equal to a half of a full-time equivalent on a yearly basis? Or are we looking for somebody that's 20 hours or whatever that may be for 6 months? Like, which one is it? I feel like there's,
Well, she has a vacancy of the 20 hours right now
Okay,
because the
all right.
person
I
left.
just-
So we're filling in the other half of that. And from
Got
a budgetary standpoint, and it's not any action that really caused this, it's more the reaction of, my question was, where's the funding for, you know what I mean? Like, that's all I was thinking, like, how do I get her person back if I still
Right.
have a full person in the other, department? And I just want guidance from you guys. It's not to blame anybody or say anything, but it's just
Right,
to
no.
say, I recognize we have 1.5 people if I'm doing the math, and I've only funded one, and I really need two, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
So,
totally
so-
understood. This is a situation that, you know, we haven't dealt with before.
Mhm.
So some of these things are gonna be coming up that are gonna give people a little bit of a pause to figure out, how can we solve the problem without misstepping?
Can we get town council recommendation on?
Yeah, I'll talk to
Yeah.
John about it tomorrow and have him research the parameters of this account and see if he has any ideas.
Okay.
So at the present time, are you on hold with a vacant spot? Is that what's happening right now?
Yeah.
So we need to get you some temporary help in there, maybe I can.
So you're saying, from my understanding, because of your question, which I appreciate, I'm looking for, I can fill the 20-hour work week immediately.
On a temporary basis, not to extend past the budget.
Of
Yeah.
July,
The 20,
June 20th, I mean, June
So
30th.
20 hours from,
But she still doesn't
now
have the
through-
money to
But,
fund it.
yeah, we would need
I don't-
to,
You still
we
don't
would need
have
to
the money.
appropriate money to
Well,
fund it,
yeah.
cause that
No, we have
is
to,
going to the veterans.
Yeah.
we have to do, yeah,
Yeah.
there was
We
an
could
extra
do the
half.
temporary, that's the key, is that it's an unforeseen thing, we could do the temporary
Through June.
employee, just a
Yeah.
temp,
Yeah.
from now until the end of the budget season.
June
Full-time.
30th.
Where I'm not
20 hours.
certain of is how we employ somebody through this account.
Mhm.
So,
Well, they'd have to employ them through their account, it would go into the red, and we'd have to fix
Yeah.
the deficit by a transfer, right?
Just to fill in a little bit of the gaps on
Okay.
this.
Jump right on.
There is budget available in elderly services. She just doesn't have a position or body in there. There was voted $30,000 for the year for half a position. It's just not, nothing's gonna get charged to her at the time being because that FTE is now getting charged, that veterans had a half, elderly services had a half.
Gotcha.
So they had
Okay, so you
30,000
have the,
each.
she has the
She has
funding.
funding
Yeah.
for half, not for a whole person.
Okay,
In veteran services, we're only paying 2 people now in there, because we're
Okay.
paying, those 2 employees lose not getting charged to
Gotcha.
veteran services anymore.
thank you for clarifying.
Thank-
So if
Yes.
that's the approach of just granting
Half
a
at this
temporary
point.
half,
Yeah.
there's
then
no
you can
real
have it.
budgetary impact at this point, but
Yeah.
there's more.
Yeah.
There's gonna be more
There's nothing to
challenges.
grant.
Right.
It's in the budget's approved.
Correct, for her, for.
So your concern is
uh,
that she's not gonna be able to find a part-time person?
right, without
Fine.
benefits.
Yeah, I mean, for these 6 months or so, I mean, that might be unfortunately what you're faced with, and able to find a full-time person come July 1st. That will help get you into the new senior center and
Mhm.
be fully prepared to help you out that way.
And I guess just from an HR perspective, guidance on permanent, not permanent, but right now, we're looking at this, that, the full-time person moved into the veterans spot, and yes, there is funding in veterans, cause Lou's with us now, but if Lou goes back,
Soon.
we don't keep him.
Soon.
If,
Maybe tomorrow.
No, but I'm saying if he does go back there, you wouldn't have, presumably, have funded enough for the FTE
Or a
to be a full-time. Yeah, you'd be a half a person over in that, and I just wanna
Yep.
point that out because we,
That's why
you
it's
know,
temporary.
we didn't ask, we didn't,
Right.
but I'm just saying, like, the formality of it Jeff was so formal about everything, you know, it was like a memo. This person's going here, you're
But
getting this,
I
doing
I
that.
think once you get to that point, if we,
Right.
then
have
we'll
to deal
deal
with
with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but go,
I
right
just
now,
don't
fill
want
that
it to be
position.
unforeseen by you, that's why I'm saying to you,
But,
when we
yeah.
go back, there'll be
Lou could be with us until July, who knows?
3 years.
Keep smiling, Lou, keep smiling.
No, so we're
Enjoy
fully
the
aware of
honeymoon,
the
pal.
situation now, we're just asking, trying to determine a way to get through this budget year. So, that's where we're at. And I do appreciate the movement and what is, the ripple effect that it's caused on you, through no fault of your own. But let's just try and figure it out and get through it, and then, get you fully staffed,
Okay.
so that you can get into the new building. I'm sorry. This is
No,
what
it's
you
fine.
wanted to
I'm
hear.
sorry.
We're trying, can't say I didn't try. But thank you for listening, thank you so much. And thank you for the temporary.
All right, so the other item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from,
February
Really?
28th.
Yeah, we only have one.
yeah, we only have one. Tommy's gonna make sure that these are up to date very quickly, right, Tom?
Yes.
Okay. So the meeting minutes from February 28th of 2023.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous. Okay. All right, public comments. Mr. McDonald?
Good evening. I have a few questions and I have.
I'm sorry, Mr. McDonald, could you please give us your name and address for the
Yeah,
record?
Kevin McDonald,
And your address, please?
140 Andover Street.
Thank you.
Could you tell us who the town's financial advisor is?
Financial advisor?
As far as the bond rating is Unibank, UFASI.
I'm not talking about the bond rating, the selectmen referred to, or actually, Mr. Hull referred to the town's financial advisor. Other than a bond rating advisor, do we have any other financial advisors?
I don't know the extent of that, to be honest with you.
Does anybody on the finance committee know?
I have no knowledge of having an independent person giving financial advice to the town.
It appeared from, my interpretation, listening to Mr. Hull, a couple meetings ago, it was his last meeting, I think, he referred to the town's financial advisor. He also referred to the town's insurance advisor. And do you know who the town's insurance advisor is?
Yes.
Yes, I do. Yeah, it's NFP.
What does that stand for?
If I had it in front of me, I could tell you, but it is a gentleman named Ed, help me with his last name, Brian.
Burn.
Thank you, Ed Burns. Ed Burns from
Do you know roughly
NFP.
what it cost us a year for that insurance advisor?
I don't have that information right now.
That's okay. One of the reasons why I was concerned about the insurance advisor is that we're self-insured for employee health benefits. And we actually have a deductible of $175,000. So before the town collects even a penny from our insurance company, a claim has to go over $175,000. So if you hurt your finger, that's one claim. If you hurt your foot, it's another claim. It's not cumulative. And so tonight, when you've been talking about hiring additional employees, I didn't hear anybody mention about the cost in addition to salary, such as insuring an entire family. It concerns me because a family of four, if they all had serious problems where the town was on the hook for $175,000, it could actually, I believe it's like $700,000 that family of four could cost us. I had kind of had a discussion with someone in the town about something innovative where we could offer some type of incentive to employees whose spouses are employed and that spouse has insurance through their company. And I just threw out a number of, say, $20,000. If by chance somebody was willing to get on their spouse's insurance and the town would give them, say, $20,000 a year and make that available within the limits of the law to everybody who might want that. I would like to see this committee do an analysis on what we're spending on insurance and what we've had to pay out for claims. And if somebody has family members that are quite impacting to the town's self-insurance liability. It might be in their best interest to get on the spouse's insurance and have $20,000 in their pocket. And what the town would do is they'd save potentially $175,000 or more for that. So I was wondering if you'd be willing to maybe have another meeting and do some type of analysis and take a deep look into that.
We normally take a good look at the insurance every year during the budget season, so I'm sure that will be coming up.
Well, if you do it during the budget season, don't you think that you would need a little bit more analysis before you get right into that? Have some hearings and maybe some public input and some input from the town council to see legally what we can do. For example, I'll give you an example. Previous town clerk, Sharon George, and I had a conversation, and her husband actually worked for the city of Gloucester, who provides insurance to their employees. And she told me that because our insurance is better, her husband got on her insurance. In other words, a guy that was employed by another town wasn't taking advantage of their health benefits, but was on our insurance. And for some reason, that just didn't sit right with me, that could happen.
Happens all the time.
Well, thank you, Mr. McDonald, we'll take that under advisement.
Okay,
Appreciate
and
it.
a couple other things that I wanted to kind of run by you. Each year, we appropriate a certain amount of money for salaries. So, for example, I believe Mr. Hull was making $175,000 a year. So at the town meeting, when his line item budget came up, the people were voting to pay him $175,000 a year. In that, there was amount of sick time and vacation time. But I didn't notice that the sick time and vacation time was an additional amount to that $175,000. I just assumed that if he had, say, 3 weeks vacation, his salary would be $175,000, and then he'd either have to take vacation or, lose it. And so I bring that up because somebody told me that when the former town manager left, he left with sick time from the time that he was the assistant town manager before he became the town manager and the town manager. So my question is, if for all those years we were appropriating X amount of dollars, and within that X amount of dollars, it was sick time and vacation time, legally, how can you have somebody leave with more than what was appropriated for their salary?
I'd have to take a look at it and get back to you.
Okay. And the finance committee's reserve account, can you tell us how much is in that account?
I cannot as of today, no.
Just roughly, like within like $10,000 or something.
I don't know. I don't know what's been processed through there. We'd have to get back to you on that as well.
Okay, I'm a little concerned with that because you're looking to transfer money tonight and do all of that, but you don't even know how much money you have in that account.
I think it's sufficient. I'm not concerned about that, but I'll get back to you on that.
Okay. And Mr. Jackson, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought you were affiliated with...
Please direct all your questions to the chair, please.
Okay. Could you ask Mr. Jackson if he was affiliated with the Sharks? Pardon me?
Dr. Jackson.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't think we really got to know each other. Could you ask Dr. Jackson if he was affiliated with the Shawshene Tech and if he's aware of what the enrollment for Wilmington students is?
I don't think that's appropriate to ask him where he worked prior to coming here. But I'll talk to
Okay,
him about it and
okay.
get back to you with it.
strike that question. Let me ask you, because one of the items on the agenda tonight was for the Shawshing Tech. And when the town manager's contract was negotiated, Mr. Bendel, who's a teacher there, was on the negotiating committee. And I noticed that after the town manager's contract was signed, that the Shawshing Tech's budget increased by $1 million. And so I was under the impression that the town of Wilmington had limited enrollment at the tech because they had obviously limited enrollment because of all the other towns. And I've been hearing that there's a lot of students that want to go to those schools, and I found it very hard to believe that the other surrounding towns would give up their spots so that Wilmington could have more spots, which brought me to the question, why was it necessary to increase their budget in 1 year by $1 million, which was, I believe, like a 25% increase?
I would have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
You're asking about something that happened in the past.
Okay, and do you know when you could get back to me on that? Like for like, I guess what I would want is the amount of students that have been that are enrolled there, the maximum amount that we could send there, and if within the last 2 years, if the enrollment has increased.
Thank you.
And lastly, Mr. Semaglia mentioned that he took a pay cut, but I noticed that he actually got a $60,000 pay raise, and I believe his salary now is $154,000. So my question's kind of simple. When it comes to a pay cut versus me seeing the contract, could Mr. Semaglia maybe explain that to us a little bit?
I didn't take a pay cut, Mr. McDonald. I took less than they offered.
You took, okay, I thought you said you took a pay cut.
No, I
Okay.
took less than they offered.
You were very clear when you said that earlier.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so regarding the highway department, when it comes to additional employees, I think we're impacted by insurance. But I drive around to different towns and I see these signs looking for snowplow drivers. And being a heavy equipment operator and a CDL license holder and also plowing snow, not for the town, I'm aware of the cost of equipment. And when I look at those signs, it's almost like they're begging for help. And I think one of the reasons why that is happening is because, for example, the cost of a truck could be like $250,000. So a guy who is faced with that type of payment, that maintenance and that insurance, and then having no snow, 1 or 2 snowstorms a year, it's tough. And so Mr. McGaldy was asking for somebody to be an additional employee hired to maintain the fields. And I had the thought that maybe it might be something that we could explore to, instead of hiring an additional employee and being impacted by the fact that we're self-insured, to put that out for bid and have something rolled in together where usually landscapers in the wintertime, they do plowing. And if we could roll something in together where we wouldn't be impacted with pensions, wouldn't be impacted with employee health benefits, and we could subcontract the field maintenance and couple that together with a snow plowing contract. I think it might be something to look at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so is there any other issues to come before the Finance Committee tonight? Any comments? No? All right, well,
Move to adjourn.
Second.
all those in favor? Thank you very much.
Nice job, Teresa.